Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The champagne flute slipped from Elise's hand, shattering into jagged crystal shards on the marble floor. But it wasn't the crash of glass that silenced the party. It was the slap. A sharp, unrelenting sound that sliced through laughter, orchestral, strings, and clinking silverware. Elise's head jerked sideways from the force of it. Her cheek flared red. The room froze. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Some guests turned away in disbelief. Others leaned in, their curiosity morbid and insatiable. Photographers lowered their cameras. Waiters stopped mid-pour. A few whispered behind manicured, hands delighted by the drama, ravenous for scandal. But Elise's heart wasn't racing because of the spectacle. It was racing because of who had slapped her. Her mother, Veronica Davenport, heiress to a shipping empire, matriarch of the elite, and, until this very moment, the picture-perfect hostess of the engagement party of the year. "You embarrassed me," Veronica hissed, her voice laced with fury and disdain. "You've always been a disappointment. Tonight proves it." Elise could still feel the sting, not just on her cheek, but in her soul. It wasn't the pain of the slap that paralyzed her. It was the familiar, festering ache of never being enough. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, judging, smirking, delighted that the girl from nowhere was finally getting put in her place. The orchestra had gone silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with tension. A tear formed in the corner of Elise's eye, but she wouldn't let it fall. She stood frozen in her midnight blue gown, the silk now stained with spilled champagne and shame. That's when he stepped forward. A voice like steel, wrapped in velvet, sliced through the stillness. "Veronica." All heads turned. Standing at the edge of the circle was Adrian Kane, billionaire, tech mogul, media-shy genius, Elise's fiancé. He wasn't shouting. He didn't have to. His presence was commanding, dangerous, electric. The tension in the room shifted as people realized they weren't just witnessing a scandal. They were about to see a reckoning. "Touch her again," Adrian said, slowly walking toward Veronica, "and I'll make sure you're blacklisted from every boardroom from New York to Zurich." His voice was calm, but his eyes blazed with restrained fury. Veronica blinked. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, Veronica Davenport looked afraid. Gasps echoed around the room. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not even Elise's father when he was alive. But Adrian Kane wasn't part of their world. He wasn't tied to legacy. He built his empire from ashes, and he had no problem burning down the old guard. "Elise," he said gently, reaching for her hand, "let's go." Still in shock, Elise let him guide her past the stunned crowd. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as they exited the ballroom, the whispers behind her swelling like a rising tide. Hours earlier. "Elise, you look radiant," her cousin Mia had said earlier that evening, her voice sugary sweet. Elise smiled, though she knew it wasn't sincere. Mia had always been competitive. She used to mock Elise for her thrift store fashion in prep school. Now she was complimenting her because Elise was marrying the man Forbes had just dubbed the most powerful under 40. The ballroom was dazzling. Walls of gold-trimmed mirrors, tables lined with white orchids, a string quartet playing in perfect harmony. On the outside, it was the perfect fairy tale engagement party, but Elise knew better. Her invitation back into this family had only arrived once Adrian's wealth became public. For most of her life, Elise had been treated like the family's shameful secret. She was the product of an affair Veronica had tried to erase. Raised mostly by nannies and sent away to boarding schools, she had spent years pretending she didn't care. But tonight was supposed to change everything. She was finally being acknowledged, celebrated, crowned. She'd thought naively that love and success would earn her a seat at the table. Instead, She was slapped in front of 200 people, humiliated like a child. Back to the present. In the car, Elise stared at her reflection in the tinted window. Her cheek was still pink, and her mascara had smudged slightly beneath her eyes. Adrian sat beside her, scrolling silently through his phone. "She planned it," Elise whispered. "She waited until everyone was watching." Adrian didn't look up. "She underestimated you and me." Elise shook her head. "You don't understand. She's always hated me, but she's never done something like this. Not in public." Adrian finally looked up. "Then it's time to show her what public really means." Later. That night, Adrian's penthouse Elise curled up on the couch, wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Adrian's apartment on the 72nd floor overlooked the entire city, glittering like a constellation, but Elise's world felt small, dark, like the lights couldn't reach her. "She didn't slap me because I spilled champagne," Elise finally said. "She did it because I'm not like them." Adrian was standing at his sleek glass bar pouring whiskey, but paused. "You're not," he agreed. "That's why I love you." She looked at him, startled. "I'm not like you either." He added, "I didn't grow up with their rules. I don't care about dinner parties and family names. I care about truth." He returned to the couch and handed her a drink. "Elise," he said softly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I didn't want to bring up tonight, but you need to see this." He walked to his office, opened a drawer, and returned with an old manila envelope. It was weathered, slightly torn at the edges. He handed it to her. Elise's name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It arrived at my office 3 months ago. No return address, just that." Elise opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a faded photograph. She recognized herself, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting in a garden. Behind her stood a man. He looked nothing like her father. The letter was short. "She is not theirs. Protect her. The truth is darker than you know." The signature at the bottom was illegible. Just a scribble. Elise's hands trembled. "I don't understand," she said. "What does this mean?" "I ran background checks," Adrian said quietly, "on your family and on this man. His name is Dr. Henry Madsen. He was a geneticist, worked for a private clinic in Switzerland that closed suddenly 10 years ago." "What are you saying?" she asked. "I think the Davenports lied to you about who you are. And I think that woman at the party tonight, the older one who said she was your nanny, she knew something." Elise's mind spun. "What if she's telling the truth?" she whispered. "What if I'm not Veronica's daughter?" Adrian met her eyes. Then everything changes. The next morning, Elise woke to find Adrian already dressed, talking on the phone in rapid French. His expression was tense. He hung up when he saw her. "The woman from last night, the nanny, she's missing." "What?" "She was escorted out by security, but she never made it to her hotel. Her phone's off, her room was untouched. No one's seen her." Elise felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You think I think someone doesn't want you knowing the truth." He handed her a passport. "What's this?" "A flight to Geneva. I've arranged a meeting with a man who used to work with Dr. Madsen." Elise looked down at the passport, then back at Adrian. "Why are you doing all this?" He stepped closer. "Because I promised to protect you, and because whatever they've hidden from you, it's time we dig it up." Meanwhile, back at the Davenport estate, Veronica poured herself a glass of wine and stared out over the garden. A man stepped into the room. Tall, pale, wearing a black suit. "She's getting close," he said. Veronica didn't turn around. "Then handle it. Just like last time." The man nodded. "And the fiancé?" She hesitated. "Adrian Kane is not our concern yet," but her eyes betrayed fear. Because she knew Adrian Kane didn't fight fair, and Elise Davenport was no longer their pawn. She was about to become their biggest threat. The snow fell like powdered silence over Geneva. Elise pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of the black car, eyes scanning the narrow alley where Adrian had arranged their meeting. Behind her, he was on a secured call, voice low but sharp. "This is where Dr. Madsen's assistant said to meet," she asked, watching her breath fog the winter air. Adrian hung up. "Yes, but something's wrong. He was supposed to be here 30 minutes ago." They were outside a crumbling stone building tucked behind the glitzy facades of Geneva's city centre. A small metal door bore no signs, just a rusted keypad and a smeared fingerprint scanner. Elise stepped forward, heart pounding. Before she could touch it, the door creaked open by itself. Adrian pulled her back. From the darkness, a figure emerged, mid-50s, tall, wrapped in a heavy coat and scarf. His hands were gloved, his eyes were sharp. "Elise Davenport?" he said, accent heavy but precise. "Yes. I'm Luca. I worked under Dr. Madsen. We don't have much time. They're watching the airports." "Who's watching?" Adrian asked sharply. The man didn't answer. He turned and disappeared back into the building. Adrian gave Elise a nod. "Stay close." They stepped inside. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with old lab equipment and locked filing cabinets. The air smelled of antiseptic and dust. A memory stirred in Elise, one she couldn't place. Something about that smell felt familiar. "You said you knew Dr. Madsen," Elise said. "Was he really connected to me?" Luca led them into a narrow room with a cracked desk and a locked steel box. "You were born in a classified research facility," he said, pulling out a thin folder from the box. "Funded by Davenport Industries. Madsen was one of the lead scientists, but not on medicine, on genetic asset tracking." "Tracking what?" Adrian asked. Luca slid the folder across the table. On the cover was a single word: Project Thorn. Elise opened it. There was a photo of a newborn baby. Underneath it was a long series of numbers, DNA codes, and one red-stamped label. Subject: ED, genetically independent. "What does this mean?" Elise whispered. Luca hesitated. "It means you weren't Veronica's biological daughter." Adrian's jaw tensed. "But she raised me. She acquired you," Luca said flatly. "When the project collapsed, they needed to hide evidence. You were one of 3 children marked for transfer, but only you survived the transition." Elise felt the room spin. "That can't be. I've seen photos of my mother pregnant with me, digitally altered or staged." Luca pulled out a thin black envelope. "Before Madsen disappeared, he gave me this, told me to keep it safe, told me if you ever found your way here, to give it to you." Inside was a single slip of paper. "They didn't just lie to you, they lied to all of us. Find Unit 12. "Elise," Adrian said slowly, "look at the date stamped at the bottom." She turned the paper. October 3rd, 1995, her birthday. Suddenly, the building shook with a low thud. A second later, glass shattered in the hallway. Adrian was already pulling her behind him. Luca ran to the door, but froze as a red laser dot appeared on his forehead. "Go!" he shouted. "Basement exit! Now!" A shot rang out and Luca fell instantly. Elise screamed. Adrian yanked her through the back hallway, pushing open a hidden panel that led into a spiral staircase. Gunshots echoed above them. They didn't stop running until they reached the alley behind the building. A black SUV waited. Their driver, Anton, threw open the door. "They're chasing us," Adrian shouted. "Hold on!" Anton hit the gas, tires screeching as bullets bounced off the reinforced panels. Inside the SUV, Elise was trembling. Not from fear, but rage. "They killed him," she whispered. "He had answers." Adrian took her hand. "We'll find more, but first, we run." Days later, a private island in the Adriatic. Elise had never been here before. Adrian had purchased the island last year after someone tried to hack his company's biometric database. Now it was their safe house, only accessible by encrypted coordinates and a personal submarine. "I need to know everything you're hiding from me," she said as they sat in a sun-soaked terrace overlooking the ocean. Adrian didn't flinch. "I've known since we met that your family wasn't who they claimed to be." Elise stared at him. "You knew?" I suspected. "The background check I ran before proposing raised red flags. Your birth certificate had conflicting entries. Your hospital records were sealed, and the biggest clue, Veronica's trust fund, included payments to something called Project Thorn until the year you turned 5. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because I didn't want to hurt you, and I needed proof." He stood and unlocked a black case from the cabinet. Inside were DNA test results, one marked Veronica Davenport and Elise Davenport. Result: no biological match, another marked Dr. Henry Madsen and Elise Davenport. Result: no match, but the third file had no name, just a number. Unit 12. Elise looked up. "Where is Unit 12? Adrian hesitated. "That's the thing. Unit 12 isn't a place, it's a person." "What?" Adrian flipped to the last page. A photograph, dated 3 weeks ago. The face was blurry but unmistakable. Mia Elise's cousin, flashback. 3 months ago, NYC Mia had invited Elise to lunch at an upscale cafe. It had seemed innocent, friendly. She'd even apologized for how she treated Elise when they were younger. But she'd also asked something odd. "Do you ever wonder why you don't look like Veronica?" At the time, Elise had laughed it off. Now, it made sense, Mia knew. Present moment, Elise's voice shook. "Are you saying Mia was part of the project too?" "She was Unit 12, Adrian confirmed, but she failed the final protocol. She wasn't viable. That's why they erased her record, but she remembers." Elise stood, the wind tangling in her hair. The sun was setting, but inside a storm was rising. "They erased her file, but kept her alive?" Adrian nodded. "Probably. To keep tabs. Or as insurance. But now that you've surfaced, Mia has motive to stop you from finding the truth." Elise turned slowly. She was at the party. She saw the slap. She smiled. That night, a secret phone call in New York. Mia sat in her luxury penthouse, twirling a glass of wine. "She's found Luca," she said into her phone. "But he's dead now, and they're off the grid." The voice on the other end was calm. "She knows about Unit 12? "Not everything," Mia replied. "But Adrian is helping her connect dots. He's the threat." "What do you want us to do?" She smirked. "Make it look like a car accident. Something poetic." "And the girl?" Mia paused. "Let her. Suffer a little longer. Then bring her to me." Final scene. Back on the island, Elise couldn't sleep. She stood alone at the edge of the cliff, waves crashing far below. Adrian joined her quietly. "We can stop, walk away, build a life." She turned, eyes blazing. "I don't want a quiet life. I want the truth. And if the truth destroys everything..." She looked back out to the sea, then let it burn. Suddenly, her satellite phone buzzed. "A restricted number," she answered. A woman's voice, cold and familiar, whispered, "You shouldn't have left the party early, Elise. You missed the real show." Then a sound, a baby crying, then static. Elise's hand trembled. That was Mia. Adrian's eyes darkened. "She has someone." Elise's voice cracked. "That baby, I know that cry." Adrian looked at her. "You think..." She turned. "To him. No. I know, that was my child." The baby's cry haunted her. Elise stood frozen on the cliffside, satellite phone clenched in her hand as the static faded. The ocean howled below, and her heart thudded like thunder in her chest. "My child," she whispered, barely able to breathe. Adrian stepped closer, face pale. "What do you mean, your child?" "Elise, you never told me you had one." She stared at him, voice trembling. "Because I didn't know. I thought I miscarried." Flashback. 2 years ago. The memory came like a stab through ice. Elise had collapsed at work from searing abdominal pain. She was rushed to the hospital. Veronica had been there when she woke up, stone-faced, lips tight. "You were pregnant," the doctor had said. "But there were complications. I'm sorry." Elise remembered crying. She remembered Veronica's cold arms around her. But now, that cry on the phone, it wasn't imagined. "Adrian," she said shakily, "what if Veronica lied? What if the baby didn't die?" He looked at her, realization dawning. "They told you it was gone. No paperwork, no birth record. You were sedated. It was the perfect setup." Elise gripped the railing. "If Mia has my child," her voice cracked, "then this was never about inheritance. It was possession." The next day, Adrian's underground vault. They pulled every string, dug through international adoption logs, private hospital records, and hidden bank wires connected to Veronica's foundation. Nothing. Until Adrian remembered something Luca had said before he died. "They lied to all of us. Find Unit 12. What if Unit 12 wasn't just Mia?" Elise said. "What if it was a facility?" Adrian scrolled through encrypted maps and surveillance coordinates he'd hacked from a black market intelligence ring. There it was. Unit 12. Off-book genetics lab, Montenegro coast, abandoned. Last activity logged 22 months ago. 2 months after Elise's supposed miscarriage. Adrian looked at her. "We're going." 2 days later, Montenegro coast. The sky was slate grey when they arrived. The lab looked like a weathered old lighthouse on the outside, but inside it was a fortress. Steel-reinforced walls, biometric locks, and thick glass panels etched with project codes. Everything was cold, clinical, and sterile. Elise's breath caught in her throat. She knew this place, not in words, in fragments, smells, the way the hallway curved, the soft chime of a distant door. They reached a sealed nursery wing. One room was still intact. On the wall, ED live sample priority. Elise stepped inside. A small crib sat in the center. Toys were scattered. A teddy bear with her name embroidered on the foot. Then Adrian pointed to the corner. A monitor blinked faintly, still powered. He tapped the screen. A video loaded. "Baby Elise, 2023. Observation transferred to subject guardian M12. Elise stared at the footage. A baby, brown curls, pale skin, wide blue eyes, her eyes. Oh my God! Her knees buckled. Adrian caught her. "She's alive," Elise whispered. "She's real." That night, secret location. They didn't return to the island. It was too dangerous. Adrian rerouted them to a secure penthouse above a private clinic in Zurich. Elise couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, holding the printout of her child's transfer file. Guardian M12 transfer date August 12, 2023. Code genetic viability retained, memory imprint rejected. "What does that mean?" she asked Adrian. He answered from the shadows. "They didn't want you to remember. So they altered your memory during your sedation. It's why the grief always felt disconnected." Her chest tightened. "They used me," she whispered. "I was a vessel to them." "No," Adrian said, walking to her. "You are a weapon, and they knew it. That's why they erased you. That's why Mia is raising your child. They're training her." Elise turned slowly. "Then it's time I go home." Return to New York. Secret entry. Adrian's private jet landed under a false flight manifest. They wore disguises and exited through an underground tunnel his company had built for security during hostile acquisitions. "You really planned." "For everything," Elise muttered. "I always prepare for war," he said. "They didn't go to the estate." Elise knew it was under surveillance. They went to a modest brownstone owned under one of Adrian's shell companies. Inside, she peeled off her wig and stared into the mirror. The woman who looked back was not the same girl who was slapped at a party. Her hair was longer now, face sharper, eyes colder. She wasn't afraid anymore. Operation Baby Retrieval. The Plan Adrian's security team confirmed it. Mia had the baby. The child was being raised under a false name in a high-security penthouse guarded by private ex-military contractors. "Why keep the baby alive?" Elise asked. Adrian explained. "She's the key to legacy. You were the prototype. But your daughter, she's the future blueprint, genetically designed, trained, and groomed to inherit everything, while you were meant to be erased. I'll burn every name off that will before I let them have her." So they built the plan. Distraction, penetration, extraction. Elise would go in herself. No decoys, no third-party mercenaries. She'll never expect me to walk in the front door. The confrontation. Mia's penthouse. Elise stepped out of the elevator. Mia stood waiting in a silk robe, sipping wine. "I knew you'd come," she said, smiling. "But you're too late. She calls me Mama now." Elise didn't blink. "Then you're going to hear her call me that too." Mia laughed. "She's not yours. You were just a failed experiment. You don't even know who your real parents are. Why fight for a child born of manipulation?" "Because I felt her heartbeat inside mine," Elise said softly. "Because I'm not a project. I'm a mother." Suddenly, the room went dark. Adrian had cut the power. Security teams rushed in, neutralizing guards. Elise ran down the hallway toward the nursery. She found her, sleeping in a crib, a tiny fist curled around the teddy bear, with Elise's name still stitched on it. Tears poured down Elise's cheeks. She lifted the baby gently. "I'm here now," she whispered. "Mommy's here." Suddenly, a gunshot. Elise turned. Mia stood at the door, blood dripping from her shoulder. Adrian's bullet had grazed her. "You'll never leave with her," Mia hissed. Elise held her daughter tighter. Then Mia said something that froze Elise's blood. "You think that's the only child they took from you?" The silence after Mia's words was deafening. "You think that's the only child they took from you?" Elise's arms tightened around her daughter. She couldn't even speak. Mia's bloodied face contorted in a smile, cruel and mocking. "You were part of something bigger, Elise. You were never supposed to wake up." Adrian stormed into the room, his gun still raised, eyes scanning between Elise and Mia. "Say another word," he growled at Mia, but Elise raised a trembling hand. "Let her speak." Mia laughed softly. "The baby was just phase 1, but the original program, the one your mother signed you into, that's still running." Elise's world tilted. "My mother?" Mia nodded. "You never wondered why you were so different, why you healed faster, learned quicker, remembered faces. No one else could. The air went cold. You weren't a normal child. Your mother knew. That's why she handed you over to the Genesis group when you were 5. She thought she was giving you a better life, a future. Instead, they made you a template." 2 days later, Adrian's safe house, Norway. Elise stared at the encrypted files Adrian had recovered from a now-defunct Genesis Group server. Her real birth certificate, her mother's authorization papers, the original experiment logs. It was all true. She had been signed into a secret eugenics program by her biological mother. She was among 6 children chosen for cognitive acceleration and trauma resilience testing. Only 2 had survived. She was one. The other, her half-brother, name, Leo A. Moretti Current, alias Board Director of Genesis Holdings. Her real enemy wasn't Mia, or even Veronica. It was Leo. The truth comes. Full circle, Adrian and Elise traced the web of shell companies tied to Genesis Holdings. Billions were funneled into private labs, offshore adoptions, and political lobbying. And Leo, he was running for international office on a humanitarian platform, funding child relief programs in front of cameras while manufacturing designer heirs in the dark. He built an empire on stolen childhoods, Elise said bitterly. Adrian clenched his jaw. "Then we burn it down. The final plan, justice from the shadows." Elise didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. They couldn't go public, not yet. The world wasn't ready for what Genesis was. There would be denials, lawsuits, and more children endangered if they moved too fast. So they used Leo's arrogance against him. Adrian's tech team hacked into his private fundraiser, a live stream broadcast with top global investors. It would be Leo's final stage. Elise would be the closing act. The gala, Rome, Global Genesis Summit. Leo stood on stage, charismatic, confident. "Together," he said, "we protect the children of tomorrow." The crowd applauded. Then the screens behind him flickered. The live feed switched. Video files played, Elise's baby being transferred from the lab. Mia's confession. Genetic logs, matching Elise to a child abducted from her womb. And finally, Leo's signature on the eugenics authorizations. Gasps, screams, a chair scraped back. Someone yelled, "Is this real?" Then Elise walked onto the stage, wearing the same silver gown she was humiliated in, this time not broken, but unshakable. She looked Leo dead in the eyes. "You stole lives in the name of progress. Mine, my daughter's, countless others." Leo's face turned white. "You can't prove anything." Elise held up a DNA test. "I'm your sister. The last child of the Genesis prototype series, the one you failed to erase." Security swarmed, reporters shouted, cameras flashed, and Leo? He ran, but not far. Adrian's security detail took him down within minutes. 1 week later, the Aftermath Genesis holdings collapsed overnight. International authorities launched investigations. Properties were seized. Veronica was arrested. In Milan, trying to flee. Mia turned state's witness for protection, but Elise didn't care. She had one thing now she never had before: her daughter. Her name was Ava. The first time Ava called her Mama, Elise wept so hard she couldn't stand. She and Adrian disappeared from the public eye after that, sold his shares, vanished from tabloids. Some say they moved to a remote vineyard in Tuscany. Others say she started a foundation under a false name, rescuing forgotten children from dark corners of the world. Only one thing was certain: the woman who once stood, humiliated at her own engagement party, she was never small again. She had taken back her voice, her family, her truth, and no one would ever take it from her again. Final scene, 5 years later, a small coastal house. Laughter in the garden. Ava, now 6, plays in the grass. Adrian tends to a lemon tree. Elise writes at a desk by the window, a letter. "Dear Ava, one day you'll learn the world isn't always kind, but you'll also learn that even when people try to erase you, there's still one thing they can't touch: your truth. You were born from pain, but raised in love, and you are free. Love, Mama." She looks out the window, sees her daughter twirling in the sunlight, and smiles, because some stories don't end with revenge, they end with freedom.